Between 1450 and 1750, something incredible happened. The entire world got connected, stitched together by ships crossing vast empty oceans. But how? How did sailors go from cautiously hugging the coast, totally terrified of the open sea, to confidently striking out across the Atlantic and Pacific? Well, the answer isn't one single invention. It's actually a fascinating mix of technologies borrowed from all over the globe that created a kind of toolkit for world travel. And that toolkit, it would completely change human history. So let's dive in and see how it all went down. To really get how big of a deal this was, you have to understand just how scary the open ocean used to be. Listen to this quote from way back around 1200. Being out on the water was like being lost in total darkness. You had no idea which way you were going. The sea was this giant, deadly mystery. All right, so here's our game plan. First, we're going to look at the massive problem of the open ocean, why it was so dangerous. Then, we'll ask the big question, why would anyone even risk it? After that, we'll see the incredible global toolkit that made it all possible, how that tech connected the continents, and finally, what it led to, the rise of huge new maritime empires. So our story really starts with this one fundamental problem. Before 1450, sailing far from land wasn't just a little risky. It was basically a death sentence. If you lost sight of the coast, you were lost. Period. This meant that the world's continents were like these huge, isolated islands, separated by oceans that seemed completely unconquerable. Which, of course, leads you to ask, what changed? What on earth could be worth risking starvation, drowning, and just being completely and utterly lost at sea for? Well, it turns out it was a powerful 1-2 punch. A bunch of factors were pushing people out of Europe, and at the same time, some incredible rewards were pulling them across the horizon. Let's start with what was pushing people away. You've got a Europe that's just getting too crowded, the population is booming, and there's simply not enough land to go around, not enough jobs, not even enough food for everyone. So for a lot of people, staying home meant a dead-end life of poverty. On top of that, you have religious persecution and, that simple human desire for a little adventure and glory. It all created a whole generation of people who were desperate for a fresh start. And check this out. This is one of the biggest drivers right here. A system called primogeniture meant that only the oldest son got to inherit the family's land and money. So, what about all the younger brothers in wealthy families? Well, they were ambitious, they were capable, but they had no land and no fortune. For those guys, a risky sea voyage was their only shot at making a name for themselves. Now for the pull factors, the really tempting prizes. The big one was Asia. Spices like pepper and cloves, beautiful silks. This stuff was worth an absolute fortune back in Europe. There was also a really strong religious drive to spread Christianity around the globe. But maybe the biggest pull of all? Europeans were desperate to find a new sea route to India. Why? Because they wanted to bypass the Middle Eastern traders who controlled the land routes. This rivalry was a huge motivation to find another way, no matter how dangerous. So the motivation was definitely there, but you can't cross an ocean just because you want to. The solution wasn't some single brilliant European invention. Instead, it was about putting together a toolkit of ideas and technologies from cultures all across Africa, Europe, and Asia. It was all about combination and adaptation. First up, you need to know which way you're going. Enter the magnetic compass. It was originally a Chinese invention used for things like fortune-telling, but it was adapted for navigation. And suddenly, for the first time ever, sailors could hold a steady course even when it was cloudy and they couldn't see the sun or stars. Okay, next problem. You know which way is north, but where in the world are you? That's where the astrolabe comes in. This device was perfected by Muslim astronomers and sailors, and it let you measure the angle of the stars. With that, you could figure out your latitude, basically how far north or south you were on the globe. The ocean went from being a terrifying, empty space to something you could actually map. Now, this is really cool. Look at the shape of that sail. European ships mostly used big, square sails. And those are great if the wind is blowing from right behind you. But what if it isn't? The lateen sail, this triangular design used by Arab sailors, was a total game changer. It let a ship zigzag against the wind. This gave ships a kind of maneuverability that was just unthinkable before. And the final piece of the control puzzle was the stern post rudder. This was another idea that came to Europe from China. It gave ships the agility they needed to handle the crazy, unpredictable currents you find out in the deep ocean. So what happens when you combine all this new tech? You get brand new, revolutionary ships. You get the Caravel, which was small and fast, perfect for exploration. You get bigger ships like the Carrack, built for trade, and later you get super efficient designs like the Dutch flute. Each one was like a specialized tool, built for a specific job in this new age of global connection. So let's recap. The motivation is there, and the toolkit is finally complete. And now, for the first time in all of human history, sailors like Christopher Columbus could reliably cross the Atlantic. They were connecting the Americas to the rest of the world, creating the very first truly global network. And this new global economy was complicated and often absolutely horrific. Europeans basically acted as the middlemen. They took things like sugar and tobacco from the Americas back to Europe. They brought luxury goods like silk and spices from Asia. And, in the most brutal part of this entire system, they forcibly shipped millions of enslaved people from Africa to the Americas to work and die on plantations. This network created incredible wealth, but it was built on unimaginable suffering. So what was the ultimate result of all this? Politically, it was the birth of a totally new kind of power, the maritime empire. These were empires built on controlling the sea, not just land. A country's power wasn't just measured by its borders anymore, but by its control of the oceans and the trade routes that crossed them. And a handful of nations got really, really good at this. You had the pioneers, Portugal and Spain leading the way, but they were followed very closely by Great Britain, France, and Holland. Their power wasn't just local anymore. Their fleets projected their influence across the entire planet. And we can't forget one more crucial piece of borrowed technology that was essential for this dominance: gunpowder. Also a Chinese invention, it gave these European powers a massive military advantage. It meant they couldn't just explore new places, they could conquer them and defend their new colonies and trading posts thousands of miles from home. So when you step back and look at the big picture, this toolkit of borrowed technology didn't just help sailors find their way. It literally redrew the map of the world, it created a global economy, and it completely shifted the balance of power. It's an amazing story of innovation for sure, but it also leaves us with a really tough and important question to think about. What were the profound and all too often devastating human costs of this newly connected world?